Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in. That's what I want to know. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson. Hello and welcome to episode 91 of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. There aren't many Australians unfamiliar with the smiley-faced eggs that Sunny Queen Australia are known for. Managing Director John O'Hara joined the team more than 17 years ago and has seen it grow from a one-channel, one-product business to a multi-faceted company that he leads, turning over $350 million and employing 140 people. In 2017, Sunny Queen invested $40 million in a food service factory to begin producing a diversified range for the out-of-home breakfast market, and last year commissioned an $800,000 omelette-only robotics line. In April 2019, Sunny Queen won a Canstar Blue survey of 2,000 Australian adults, recognising them as the #1 egg brand in Australia for consumer satisfaction. Turns out it's not just the eggs that are smiling. Hello and welcome to the show, John.
Nice to be here with you, James.
John, it's an absolute pleasure to have you in. I'm really excited to get into the interview, and it's going to be an exciting interview about eggs that I've not done. So I'm pumped to open up the conversation, and I'm sure that you're going to demonstrate just how passionate people can be about eggs.
Absolutely. I said to someone recently that, do you get bored with just dealing with eggs? And I said, well, it's crazy. I mean, it seems like just a one product, one category. It's so simple to do. But when you actually think about what goes on with eggs, it's actually quite entertaining, and every day there's something new happening, something different. So we don't ever have a boring time here at Egg Central.
John, as you know, the first question I like to ask is around a crazy hospitality story. If you've got a crazy story, I would love to hear it. Otherwise, a memorable hospitality experience.
Oh, look, I think an interesting one was I was at a trade show, and we had just introduced our omelettes into the marketplace. And of course, to present our omelettes, we actually transport them frozen. And so we pack them up, we cook them, freeze them instantly, and they get transported off. I'm there talking to these people from the hospitality industry, and they said, oh, can we try some? And I said, sure, and this is what you do. So we took one out and we put it in the microwave, and they had a taste, and I was a bit skeptical, and they looked at me and they said, God, this tastes wonderful. It tastes like an omelette. I said, that's because it is. It was a crazy thing in time, but I suddenly realised we've got a big job ahead of us because, trying to convince people that it doesn't matter how it's transported, it's what it's like on the plate. So there you go. And eggs do regenerate, our products anyway, regenerate very nicely. So an omelette's an omelette.
It's an interesting point because with eggs specifically, it is hard to do that. So I'm wondering whether there is something different about the way that you do things to be able to, you said regenerate. This is a term that I've not heard of. Obviously, it's something that you guys deal with regularly. So is there a component there in what you guys do to be able to regenerate the product better?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question, James. What's really important, eggs is a very fragile product, and there's a lot of water content naturally in eggs as part of it. So through the cooking process and the freezing process, some of the methods that we use and also the recipes we use combine to ensure that when the product's regenerated or reheated, that it performs as a fresh product. And so, over time we developed it. At the time, we didn't even realise, particularly through the recipe process, that this was an issue because people had this issue around the world. Particularly, we were trying to reheat via a microwave, which is probably the most intense form of reheating you can get. So once we had achieved it and we had this beautiful product, we told people what we'd done. They said, well, how did you do that? Because people have that trouble with it everywhere because it turns out rubbery or hard or whatnot, but ours came out nice, fluffy omelette. So look, we started off with that, and then of course through the heating or the cooking process and then the freezing process, we were able to actually refine it to be even better. So fortunately, with good technology these days, you just get a better product.
How do you go about testing those sorts of things? Like, I'm imagining labs. So how do you go about actually producing that?
Yeah, look, we try to refine our products as much as we can in our laboratories. Test kitchens, really, they're not laboratories, they're test kitchens. So we try to replicate on a smaller scale. So we go there, we make our products, we cook them, we freeze them, and then we eat them. And once we feel that we've got it right, we then go down onto the factory floor and we do production trials. And then it may take 1, it may take 3, it may take 10 till we get it to a satisfactory level. And that's what we do. But all the way along, we always taste the products because at the end of the day, it's all in the taste.
Yes. What sort of time period are you looking at for those sorts of tests?
We allow about 3 months testing to get
Yes.
it right. I mean, the actual development of the products takes a lot longer, but when we get to a stage that we believe we've got a concept that works, about 3 months.
Yes. I'm going to take it to the level that I like to go, get it abstract. Why do you do what you do?
Yeah, it's every day you've got to get out of bed and be passionate about something. And I suppose when I joined Sunny Queen, almost 18 years ago, we were just a one state, one product business just doing eggs, and thought there's got to be more to this. And I really wanted to take it to the next level. I mean, you can eat eggs, but eggs is also an ingredient to many other things. And I just thought, wow, what can we do with eggs? And so, I'd already been around the world quite a few times doing other things. I realised there was other opportunities out there. You go out in the markets and see what other people are doing with eggs, and they turn them into egg patties, they turn them into omelettes and fritters and tartars or whatever. And so I just thought, well, why don't we take our company to a different level? So, I just get passionate about these sorts of things and say to myself, what can we do to make this better, and how can we be a bit different and maybe help consumers with something that's a little bit left field? So off we went and we created this business. And literally when we first, particularly on the omelette side, we actually built a little factory and we actually started producing omelettes, and we didn't even have a customer. So it was almost like the field of dreams. Build it and they will come. Well, we built it and then we had to sell it. So that was an interesting journey.
I want to stick with that why before it gets into seeing how you build that customer base. You building the product before there's the customer. I'm interested in why specifically eggs jumped out at you as something that is it that it was there and you went, great, this is something I can be passionate about? Or were you thinking, I really love eggs?
Well, there's an interesting story is that I used to work in the dairy industry. So I've come from, if you like, an agri background and probably commoditized products, but agri products. And I've always been interested in adding value. And I thought, look, my career in the dairy side was coming to an end. And I thought, well, commodity products, surely there's something else I can do. So I set a goal of this time I'm going to find a product that is high volume, high margin, high profile and sexy. And pardon the pun, but I end up at the arse end of the world. So, I end up with eggs. So I decided, well, how do I turn that into exactly what I wanted? So hence I started to look at ways I could make eggs sexy. So there you go.
In making eggs sexy, there's some obvious branding around the smiley face on the egg. Is there a deeper logic behind that subconscious positivity, or is it literally just a smiley face on an egg?
No, well, we sat down with our advertising agency, our public relations agency, a whole group of us, and the ad agency, to their credit, ran it. They said, look, we've got to come up with a blueprint for your product because, we're in a commoditized market. We need to be different. We need to stand out. What are we standing for? Anyway, after a long journey and through all these processes, we said, what's the one word that really describes us? What do we want to be known for? And after I sort of got thinking about it, got my head around it, I was looking around the room and people were talking about experiences with eggs like the old soldiers where you dunk the toast in and eating it. And I noticed around the room, everyone was smiling. They always had a happy story about eggs, putting stink bombs to one side. I just said, well, what about smile? Happy, because that's what eggs do to people. We can make people happy. So from there, they said, what a great idea. So we summarised our whole brand blueprint into this one word, smile. And then we decided, how can we recreate this? And anyway, we got talking about it's on our website, it's on our stationery, our business cards, all those sorts of things. And someone piped up, one of the agency guys said, can we put a smile on eggs? I said, I don't know. I said, we've got to stamp eggs, so we'll go and check. Anyway, we could. And so we decided we would. I couldn't believe the reaction when we started producing our Sunny Queen eggs with a smile on it and the sort of reaction we got from the marketplace. It's just incredible. We got some great stories there.
Yeah. What sort of reactions did you get? And was it that big a difference that it was this chalk and cheese?
Well, it was. At the time, eggs had become commoditized. The house brand had taken over from the branded product and everything was driven by price. And we always wanted to give people a happy experience, so we had to back that up. But we knew we were doing something special when we had a lot of letters, but one always stood out was we actually had a prison officer from Western Australia said, look, I'm a prison officer and obviously the job I do, I get a lot of sadness, a lot of bitterness, a lot of angriness in a day, and that can affect me. But I really enjoy it when I wake up of a morning, I go to the fridge and I open up the fridge and I see these 12, 10, 9, 8 smiley faces looking at me every morning, and it just puts a smile on my face.
That's
and
awesome.
I thought, how good's that? Yeah.
Wow.
And we've had other people comment, the kids love it, they love the smiley face. It engages, and I think if we can have that emotional attachment with people through what we do and what we do on our website with our smiley Facebook and everything else, and the interaction, I think that personal connection is just priceless. It's gold.
John, I'd like to ask you how you define what it is that you do.
Put simplistically, very much aware that we have probably one of the most valuable sources of cheap protein in eggs. With a glass of orange juice, you've got all your vitamins and minerals that you need. So for me, it's about always being conscious of feeding people and feeding all people, whatever their stage in life is. And you read all the papers today about people doing really well, and then you also read about the people not doing it so well. We have a product that we can feed all those people regardless of their stage of life and where they're at in their life in terms of their health and well-being. So pretty important.
I'd like to press on that. Can anyone at any stage be fed by other things as well, or just eggs?
I know everyone should have a balanced diet, but eggs are nutritionally probably one of the best foods you can ever eat. It really is a superfood, a natural superfood. The point I make is that not everyone can afford high quality beef, a lamb, even chicken, which is one of the cheaper forms of protein. Eggs for any environment are good, and they're good for young people and old people and everyone in between. So we don't discriminate, we're there for everybody, and we're affordable.
I'm interested to know, in your 17 years in the industry, you would have seen so many diets, movements, vegetarian, veganism. What impact has that had on eggs over that time?
You should never say it doesn't have any impact, because we're all going for share of stomach and share of throat, whatever way you want to put it. But at the end of the day, I look at eggs, and ever since I've been here, the egg consumption in Australia has gone from 156 eggs per person to over 240 eggs per person per year. And it's growing at about 2 to 3% per annum. If it's having an effect on us in terms of people going to other parts and other diets, we're not seeing it. What we are seeing, though, is I think people understanding with eggs what a valuable source of protein it is and its overall goodness. It's just a great superfood, and people go on egg diets too. So we're there for a balanced diet, and other diets will come and go. Some will say it doesn't really matter.
I'm interested to hear how you see eggs fitting in the broader scheme, where there's movements towards lab-grown meats and other proteins, say insect proteins. We've had an insect farm on the program. There's alternative meats that has come up several times on the show. So how do you see eggs fitting in that environment?
Look, I think people will always have choice, and you're not going to eat one particular protein source every day unless you're vegan or vegetarian, I suppose, and then you'll choose even within that a range of products. We'll fit in there, no problem whatsoever. I'm not frightened about the big things, plant-based protein. We know it's going to be a huge business worldwide. People are already doing it, so it's not new. It's taking, I suppose, vegetarianism a step further and focusing on this plant-based protein. So if I look at it, the world as it grows in numbers, and we've got to talk about the population growth, we know maybe a decade or 2 decades away, we won't have enough land and enough animals to feed people. So some of the protein source will come from plant-based and others as well. I mean, whether insects stay the course, I don't really know. Some will come and go, but there will be a mainstream in plant-based, and so be it, because we're going to have to feed the people through a variety of methods. So I'm not concerned. I think eggs actually has a very important role to play, because our carbon footprint is low, sustainability is high, and we have a very good source of protein, and it's cheap. So look, I think we're in a good place.
Yes. I open up a bit more of a discussion around the macroeconomics and how the macroeconomic world affects your industry a little bit later on. I have 2 other things. I mentioned I wanted to come back to dairy, and it's still coming back to that. I just want to ask a quick question. Can you settle a debate on cholesterol? Is it good? Is it bad? What's the situation with eggs?
Eggs are good. In fact, the Heart Foundation now has no limit on eggs. CSIRO, an egg a day is okay, a couple of eggs a day. The whole issue was around the cholesterol and what people were mistaking dietary for serum cholesterol. Eggs is overall, it's a good product. In fact, we have cardiologists endorsing that people should eat more eggs, because what happens is eggs fill you up. There's about 4% fat in there, I think, roughly. The cholesterol is dietary, it doesn't affect you. And they say if you eat the eggs, you feel full, so therefore you don't have biscuits and cakes and all the processed foods that are probably worse for you than anything else. So it has 2 positive impacts. One, it keeps you off the rubbish, and secondly, it's got a lot of goodness in it anyway, so happy days.
Excellent. Coming to the dairy front, how has having worked in the dairy industry, impacted the way that you see the egg market?
Look, there's no doubt had a great influence on me in terms of the way I thought about what we should do with eggs, because milk, again, liquid milk, you consume it, drink it, whatever. But the dairy industry then went on and added further value to milk through, in early days, powdered milk, a way to store milk and send it out to the country where they didn't have fresh milk. But then yogurts, cheeses, ice cream, our meal solutions, our value added has been around for about 10 years. We've got so many new products in the pipeline that are so exciting. I can't wait till we get them into the marketplace.
What is it that you're learning about or exploring at the moment?
Well, for me, I'm an avid reader of business magazines and papers particularly, just keeping a hand and also research, keeping an eye on the trends of the marketplace, where consumers' heads are at, where they're going, what's the pulse of the nation like, how does that affect us as a business and also us as individuals. So I tend to look at things like that. I tend to watch certain current affairs programs that have got real meat attached to them, not the magazine style stuff, but again, just tapping into what's going on in the real world. That's where my interest lies.
What publications do you really respect?
I enjoy reading the Fin Review, obviously Australian-based business paper. That certainly gives me a great news source and also an opportunity to see what's going on in other businesses. I read a lot of articles out of various publications like the Australian Institute of Company Directors has some good stuff there. Magazines online I don't tend to do. I tend to read a lot of articles through, again, the publications that come out via these organisations. And I attend conferences where I can, where I think it's important. So I'm forever reading stuff, strange enough. So you get these articles across your desk and, yep, I'll read that, I'll do that. So I get a lot of stuff online. If there's a few people that I listen to, read their blogs. Yeah, a lot of articles.
So who's an egg authority, like a global egg authority?
That would be me.
Of course. But who's someone that you look to, or are you looking at adjacent markets to try to, obviously you're staying on the pulse of what's happening nationally and internationally, and being an authority yourself, of course. But is there a complementary good that maybe you're looking at that provides insights into the direction of the egg market?
Yeah, okay. Well, firstly, inside the industry, we're involved in the International Egg Commission. We recently had a conference and they talk about all the different trends that are going on around the world. And I also look at a couple of the leading, what I would regard as the leading egg companies in the world, what they're doing in the space. But to be absolutely honest with you, I tend to look externally, not necessarily at poultry, but at food in general, as to who's doing some really neat things out there and what's their approach. And I think about how can I relate that to our business? Is it a product format? Is it service delivery? Is it just the way we conduct our business? So I tend to look more globally, particularly in terms of food companies, but I'm also looking globally in terms of the area of not only artificial intelligence, but the whole area of new communication methods, robotics. So yeah, I tend to look further afield than the egg industry because we're more of a cottage industry and I think we've got a lot of room to grow. We're almost the final frontier, if you like.
On robotics, I understand that Sunny Queen has made some investments in robotics and automation. So how do you decide when to make those sorts of large-scale investments that click that scale up to the next bracket? There was a previous guest, Guy Greenstone, who discusses that that's something he was exploring. He was talking about this concept, making those investments. How do you go through those processes and what sort of numbers are you looking at when you make those decisions?
When we first started the business, I noticed as I went around the world and visited a few factories that were making omelettes. Every facility I went to, bar one, was very labour intensive, from picking omelettes up off the line to folding omelettes to placing omelettes to sending them down and packing them off. And I always kept that in the back of my mind thinking, well, there must be a better way than that. I mean, why haven't people automated that? So put that to one side. So when we opened up our facility here 4 years ago, and it was based on volumes really, when you start to get into a lot of hours of production, you can see how people were doing a manual task over and over and over again. You sort of like say to yourself, look, it's actually time. That's a job that should be automated. And so it was a combination of that, the volumes and the workplace health and safety. We said, look, enough's enough. So we set about finding some robotics that could do it for us. And it took us a while, a couple of years, but yeah, we invested in it and it's operational, which is terrific.
And what do those robots look like? There's been a lot of conversation over a long period of time now to change this perception of what those robots look like. They're not, obviously not human looking things. What does that actually look like for Sunny Queen?
Yeah, literally we have two robots. All they are is robotic arms, and they move at a high speed and they pick and place, and that's the job they do, and pick and place, and there's a folding element as well, but not in a robotic sense. So you just have this area that's got these arms moving and obviously cameras and sensors and picking up where the omelettes are sitting, and then it places them.
So you're just looking at a payback period, or what sort of operational figures do you look to make those investment decisions?
We look at what it's going to do for us in terms of output. So for us, we work on a payback system of around 3 years, say. But our key driver was more to do with the fact that it was an health and safety issue. But we thought, how do we get rid of that? I mean, we would have done it anyway, but because these things work so well and we had a particular task to do, we were able to combine, if you like, the workplace health and safety issue with an opportunity to install these things, which had economies of scale, if you like, attached to it. So for us, it was a payback, as I said, about 3 years.
So it just becomes simple math, ultimately, just with the right numbers.
Well, we know our line speeds and everything attached to it. So when we talk about the payback period, we include how many omelettes will that produce during that period of time, and also the number of people required to do the tasks. And it becomes just a mathematical equation, really, at the end of the day.
So how do you calculate for the unpredictable components of that? How do you account for risk?
Look, planning is so important in all of this, and then you run a number of scenarios or a number of options to see, well, what is my level of risk? And for us, it was pretty simple. It was either going to work or it wasn't going to work. And if it wasn't going to work and we invest in these robots, what is sunk in terms of costs? And for us, the robots themselves you can buy off the shelf. It was only some parts that we required to be different because of what we were making. So we could work out, in terms of our risk, the proportion that would be what we call sunk costs. In other words, non-renewable costs. So that's how we did it, and that's how we manage it.
What pitfalls in decision making do you see other companies in your market making?
Look, for me, probably the simple answer I would say is they act like egg companies and not food companies. It's as simple as that.
I won't press on that too much. I can feel that you don't want to say too much there.
You never know who's listening.
That's right. The next question I'd like to ask you, John, is your creative process. How do you create an environment for, firstly, yourself to think creatively and then for others to think in a creative sense? Or do you outsource that creative thinking?
My preference is always for internal creativity versus external, because we, as a group, as a team, understand our business and our markets better than anybody else, but we're not silly enough not to have external input. So for us, in creating the environment, if I look broadly at the team, we have sessions, like we do a lot of research on market trends, where's the market heading, what are food companies doing, and so we have sessions around new product development. We look at other, as I said, markets, and then we start to whittle down the concept areas that we want to play in and what sort of things can we do. That's the internal process, if you like. For me, I do my best thinking either away from the office or at home, or if I'm up the beach and I'm not there trying to solve a problem. I just leave an open mind and try to allow my mind to stay open, to allow things just to pop into my head. The other thing I do, though, is I attend conferences, and I got to tell you, I just love going to places where, you know, people are talking about things where their ideas are spun around, and I sit there and think, how could I take that idea and convert that into something that could be useful for us, or something will just pop into my head based on the knowledge I have. So it tends to work that way. And in terms of external, we involve some of our creative agencies, our research companies, and we then start to filter things down until we get to what we believe is right. We may end up here over to the left and end up with something completely different over to the right, because we've funneled it through a creative process, if you like, of thinking and market potentials and what's out there.
How do you handle competitors in your space?
Well, I treat every competitor with respect. Some of them may disagree with that if they're listening, but the bottom line is I do. I tend to watch what they do, but I'm more concerned about what we're doing and where we're going, because I want to be in front of the pack. And to do that, you've got to do your own thing.
Mm-hmm. Before I move into the last few questions, I want to ask one more around collaborations. And your eggs are used as inputs in products for other brands. So how do you develop ways to collaborate creatively with other brands?
Well, look, if you're talking about the humble egg, the simple things there are what goes with eggs. You talk about bacon and eggs and whatever else, and you sit down with other players in the industry and work out promotional opportunities if that's the way you want to go. For us, probably where most of our work is done is collaborating with potential customers and customers on solving problems for them, and then we tend to engineer and work on products that can possibly fill that. And again, we go through, if you like, a sieve, bring it back down into, well, this is what we believe it is, and this is what we think you should do. So we do a collaborative approach. We sometimes take a brief and other times we go to them with an opportunity. But the important thing is to understand what is it about their business that they're doing that we can perhaps, through our product knowledge and understanding, how can we help them to achieve a better outcome than what they've got today?
To combine that with your answer to a previous question around, say, going to the beach, thinking in that creative state, how much of that is being at the beach thinking about work versus you deciding to actively be in an open state of mind to allow creative ideas to flow? And what is it, have you noticed how you get yourself into that creative state for ideas to flow? For
us, we've been building a business from scratch. What we do is relatively unique in this country in so much the way we actually do it. I think a lot of the thought processes come about through, we're a breakfast product primarily. There are gaps in the market when you take on board things like convenience, taste, the health and wellness and well-being of people, authenticity of product. And so you've already read about all those sorts of things. So they're wandering around your head. And for us, it's a matter of how do we fill that factory? And we try to solve problems. If you like, the mind is always open because it's not only the beach. I mean, I could be in the shower or even sitting on the toilet and an idea just pops into your head.
They're the best places to come up with ideas.
Absolutely. And what's happened, I suppose, if you look at the subconscious and conscious, and I'm not a psychologist in any stretch of imagination, but I really do believe in the power of the subconscious in solving problems. And you just, to me, you leave your mind open to, we've got a problem here. We've read about all this information. I just think your mind internally does do a lot of processing, particularly when you're asleep, because you always hear about people with pens and papers beside their bed and they come up with a solution. And I've always felt that that's been an important part of the creative process. Trying to maintain an open mind, knowing you've got certain problems that you need to solve, and you know you've read a lot about how to go about solving it. You may not have come up with a solution, but it's there and it's working, and it may take just someone saying something or doing something, all of a sudden, bang, there it is. Mm. In fact, I'll tell you a little story, and I can't tell you if it's true or not, but I was at the Gympie muster once, and one of the former members of the Seekers was saying that Don Henley was writing Boys of Summer, and there was one line, he just couldn't finish it off, and it was the Deadhead sticker on a Cadillac. And he was driving down some California road and he saw the Deadhead sticker on a Cadillac, and it took him 4.5 years to write that song. So there you go. You just got to keep your mind open.
Well, I hope that the story's true. I hope that it's true.
Yeah, it was Keith from the Seekers who explained it, and they were talking about songwriting, and he said, look, I know of this situation of which I just explained to you. So Don Henley, it was something like 4.5 or 3.5 years he sat on this song because he wasn't satisfied he had the right answer, and all of a sudden he was just driving down the road and saw the Deadhead sticker on a Cadillac.
There you go.
There you go. Learn something new every day.
Yes. John, over the course of your career, have you had someone who's guided you? People throw around the term mentor all the time, and I've used it on the program many times before. What does that leader look like, and what have they looked like in your career?
It's probably one of the regrets I have in my life is I've looked for mentors. I've spoken to probably... I tend to look at the people that I've worked with over the years, and I've observed how they've operated, and I've learnt mainly through what I've seen through that. But I couldn't name you a particular mentor in my life because I've just never really had one. I used to be part of a group that all sit around and talk about things, but I found that it was pretty irrelevant to where I was at in my life. So in the end, it was more about just keeping an open mind, attending conferences, listening to successful people talk and how they go about doing things. I just love anyone I met who's successful in life. I'm not talking monetary, I'm just successful in what they've done. I always ask them about their story. And so rather than an individual mentor, if you like, where I sit down with someone once a month, I just used to ask people about their stories.
You can learn anything from anyone. You don't know where it's going to come from. Is that what's driving that story component? Or is it that you remember the lessons from stories better? What is it that prompts you to ask those stories?
Oh, look, it's a bit of everything. You never stop learning. And for me, it's the approach and how they went about. Like, this is where I started and here was my journey. Here are the pitfalls. This is what I learned. There's pitfalls in everything people do. And if you can learn from others' mistakes, then you're better off. So I had no clinical position on all this. For me, it was more reinforcing that I wanted to be successful in whatever I do and look at. And I just find if you talk to people and just generally want to understand how they've gone about things, because everywhere else, and even all the recent things you're seeing out there, everyone remembers and loves the negative side of things and tearing people down. Whereas if we're going to go forward as a business, as a country, as a nation, as a world, we've got to be better than that. And we've got to start looking at what does it look like to be successful and how do we make it happen?
Yes. John, I've only got a couple more questions for you. I'd like to ask your biggest challenge right now.
For us, we've got a few challenges on the horizon. I mean, one is around, there's a lot of talk around converting from cage to cage free, whether that be in a barn situation where the birds sit in a barn or free range. It's a massive upheaval for the industry, and that's going to require a lot of hard thinking, a lot of decision making. And when you go through such a structural change, there's a lot of risks attached because you build or change things out in the country. And as you know, we're undergoing a lot of stress out there at the moment. But you start ploughing in hundreds of millions of dollars into changing things, you want to make sure you get it right. Otherwise, you end up very badly wrong. So that's certainly something on my mind. The other one, of course, I think is building on where we've got to with our value-added products, taking it to the next level. I really think that we've only just started. I mean, we've got a good baseline now, but it's what we do next is going to, I think, define us even more so. Biosecurity is something that we always worry about here in the country. With obviously, we have a lot of animals and we care for them all, and we just got to make sure that they're safe and well protected. So yeah, from a business perspective, they're certainly the things that I worry about and concerned about.
Is there something sociologically that you want to change, that you would like consumers to see differently?
The only thing that springs to mind is that there's a lot of people out there with varying views on animal welfare, and I get all the arguments from everybody. We know that every production system has its strengths and weaknesses. In an ideal world, you'd have probably birds out of all cages in an ideal world, but we don't live in the ideal world. As I said to you earlier in this, you have people who can afford free range, and free range does cost more than cage. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. So some people can afford it and they make those decisions for whatever reasons they want to make them. But there is a section of society that can't afford that and they need protein, and we have a nation of people buying junk food and drinking bad stuff, and they're getting overweight, obese, then you get diabetes and heart conditions, and we're heading for a major issue. So I do worry about how it all goes, and I think we cannot forget the vulnerable. And everyone says, well, we can safety net them with the government. The government can't solve everything, and we've got to start taking some responsibilities, all of us. And it's the way we go about it. And I think that as long as there's sensible conversations based on fact, science, and what's happening in the total market, then I think we'd be much better off.
John, I've only got one more question for you, and I'd just like to know who you'd like to hear on the show next.
There's a wonderful guy, and I'm not sure if he still does this sort of thing, but he's a social researcher, one of the best in the game that I've ever come across. Wonderful insights whenever I heard him, and I haven't heard him for years. So his name's Hugh Mackay. Hugh Mackay. He's a social researcher. He's an older version, if you like, of Bernard Salt in terms of demography and whatever else, but he's more of a social researcher, and the insights that guy has in society and where people are heading and where their heads are at is just second to none.
Perfect. Thank you very much for being on the show today, John. It's been incredible and insightful having you on the program.
James, my pleasure, and all the very best.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, John.
This program is hosted by James Henderson, with technical production by Jake Olver. Voiceovers were by Angus Brennan and Shim Phelan. Thanks to our distribution team, led by Stephanie Holland, and a special thanks to you for tuning in every week. This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.